Maya sat in the back seat of her uncle's car, watching the city fade away through tear-blurred eyes. Every mile that passed felt like another piece of her old life crumbling behind her. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, trying to hold back the sobs that kept rising in her throat. 24 years old, and this is what her life had come to. Being shipped off like unwanted cargo to marry a stranger in some remote village she'd never even heard of. "It's for the best, dear," her grandmother had said 3 days ago, patting her hand with that pitying look Maya had grown to hate. "The city hasn't been kind to you. Maybe a simpler life with simpler people will bring you happiness." Simpler people. Maya knew what that really meant. It meant someone desperate enough or kind enough to overlook what everyone else saw first. Her weight. Always her weight. She'd tried everything. Every diet plan, every exercise routine, every motivational video online. But the numbers on the scale seemed to have their own stubborn will. And with each failed attempt, the comments from her family grew sharper, the disappointment in their eyes deeper. Her mother had stopped introducing her to potential matches 2 years ago. Her cousins had all gotten married one by one, leaving Maya as the only one left at family gatherings. The whispers behind her back, the concerned looks, the helpful suggestions that were anything but helpful. Then last week, her grandmother had made the announcement at dinner. She'd found someone, a farmer from her old village where she'd grown up before moving to the city 50 years ago. A good man, she insisted. Humble, hard-working, someone who wouldn't judge based on appearances. Maya had wanted to scream. She'd wanted to throw her plate across the room. Instead, she'd just sat there feeling the weight of everyone's relief. Finally, someone would take Maya off their hands. Her parents had agreed within a day. "A fresh start," her father had said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Country air, healthy food, it'll be good for you." Nobody had asked what Maya wanted. Nobody had considered that maybe, just maybe, she deserved better than being shipped off like a problem to be solved. The landscape changed as they drove. Tall buildings gave way to smaller towns. Then those towns spread out into farmland that seemed to stretch forever. Fields and more fields, with the occasional house dotting the horizon. "Almost there," her uncle said, breaking the silence that had lasted for the past hour. He'd been the one volunteered to drive her, probably because he was the only one who wouldn't spend the whole trip giving her advice she didn't ask for. They turned onto a smaller road, then onto an even smaller one. The pavement became gravel, and Maya's stomach twisted into tighter knots with each bump and turn. Finally, they pulled up in front of a house that made Maya's heart sink even lower than she thought possible. It was old, not charming old, but weathered old. The paint had faded to a dull gray white, and the wooden porch sagged slightly on one side. A rusty pickup truck sat in the driveway, looking like it had seen better days about 10 years ago. Behind the house, fields stretched out as far as she could see, but even to Maya's untrained eye, everything looked basic and worn. This was it. This was what her life had become. A man emerged from the house as they parked. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked rough even from a distance. He wore faded jeans with dirt on the knees and a simple gray t-shirt that had definitely seen too many wash cycles. Thomas Reed, her husband-to-be, the man who was supposed to be her fresh start. He approached the car with an uncertain smile, and Maya noticed he seemed nervous too. Somehow that made it worse. He wasn't some confident farmer ready to rescue her. He looked like someone who'd drawn the short straw and was trying to make the best of it. "You must be Maya," he said as she climbed out of the car. His voice was gentle, quieter than she'd expected. "I'm Thomas. Welcome." Maya couldn't bring herself to smile. She just nodded, clutching her bag tighter. Thomas helped her uncle unload her suitcases from the trunk. She'd packed 4 bags, trying to bring pieces of her old life with her, but now they looked ridiculously out of place against the backdrop of this rural simplicity. "I've prepared the bedroom for you," Thomas said, carrying 2 of her heaviest bags without any visible strain. "It's not much, but I hope you'll be comfortable. We can arrange things however you like." Her uncle stayed for coffee, making awkward, small talk with Thomas while Maya sat silently on a worn couch that had probably been there since before she was born. The house was clean, she'd give him that, but everything was basic. Old furniture, no decorations to speak of. A small television that looked ancient. The kitchen visible through a doorway showed simple wooden cabinets and appliances that definitely weren't smart or modern. When her uncle finally left, Maya stood on the porch and watched his car disappear down the long driveway. She felt like her last connection to her real life was driving away, leaving her stranded in this place. "I know this must be overwhelming," Thomas said softly from behind her. "I can't imagine what you're feeling right now, but I want you to know that there's no pressure. We can take things as slowly as you need." Maya turned to look at him. He seemed sincere, his eyes kind, but tired. Maybe he was just as much a victim of grandmother's matchmaking as she was. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked, the first real words she'd spoken to him. "You don't know me. Why would you want to marry a complete stranger?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, looking out at the fields. "My grandmother knew your grandmother when they were girls. She spoke highly of your family, and honestly, I'm not getting any younger. Running a farm doesn't leave much time for dating." He gave a small, sad smile. "I figured maybe we could build something good together. Something real." Something real. Maya almost laughed at the irony. Nothing about this felt real. It felt like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. That night, lying in the small bedroom with its faded floral wallpaper and creaky bed, Maya stared at the ceiling and cried as quietly as she could. Through the thin walls, she could hear Thomas moving around in what must be his room. He'd given her the better bedroom she'd noticed, the one with the bigger window and the attached bathroom. She thought about her friends back in the city, her job at the bookstore that she'd had to quit, her small apartment that had been cramped but hers. All of it gone now, traded for this strange new life she never wanted. Tomorrow, Thomas had told her, he'd be up before dawn to work the fields. She could sleep in, take her time getting used to the place. He'd said it like he was being kind, but Maya heard it for what it was. He didn't expect her to be useful. He didn't expect much from her at all, and maybe that was the worst part. She'd been sent here because no one expected anything from her anymore. Not success, not happiness, not even love. Just existence. Just being someone else's problem in a place far enough away that her family wouldn't have to watch her struggle anymore. Maya pulled the thin blanket up to her chin and watched the moonlight stream through the window, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. Somewhere in the distance, she heard an owl calling. The sound was lonely and haunting, exactly how she felt. This was her life now, and she had no idea how she was going to survive it. The rooster's crow jolted Maya awake at what felt like the middle of the night. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and squinted at the screen. 4:30 in the morning. Who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning? She heard Thomas moving around downstairs, the quiet clink of dishes, the sound of the coffee maker gurgling to life. Then the back door opened and closed, and through her window, she watched him walk toward the fields in the dim pre-dawn light. Carrying what looked like tools and a thermos, Maya pulled the pillow over her head and tried to go back to sleep, but it was useless. The unfamiliar sounds of the countryside kept filtering in. Birds she'd never heard before, the distant moo of cows. Even the silence felt loud compared to the constant hum of the city. By 6, she gave up and dragged herself downstairs. Thomas had left coffee made and a note on the counter in surprisingly neat handwriting. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. I'll be back around noon. No pressure to do anything today. Just rest and settle in." Maya poured herself coffee and looked around the small kitchen. The cabinets were old but sturdy. The countertops were clean but scarred with years of use. She opened the refrigerator expecting it to be nearly empty, but instead found it fully stocked. Fresh vegetables, eggs, milk, cheese, bread that looked homemade. For someone who was supposed to be poor, Thomas seemed to eat well. The first week crawled by like a strange dream. Thomas left before dawn every day and didn't return until after sunset. He'd come in dusty and exhausted, head straight for the shower, then make dinner for both of them. He never asked Maya to cook or clean, never complained about her sleeping late or spending most of her days reading books she'd brought from the city. "You're still adjusting," he'd say whenever she apologized for not being more helpful. Take your time. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling of being useless. She was used to working, to having a purpose. Here, she felt like a guest in someone else's life. A guest who wasn't sure why she'd been invited. On the 8th day, she decided to explore the property. She needed to understand exactly how small and limited this new life of hers was going to be. She walked past the house toward what she assumed was the edge of Thomas's land, but the fields kept going. And going. She walked for 15 minutes and still saw nothing but crops stretching in every direction. Corn on one side, wheat on the other, some other crop she couldn't identify beyond that. When she finally turned back, hot and tired, she found herself wondering exactly how much land Thomas actually worked. This seemed like a lot for one person. That evening, as Thomas made dinner, she asked him, "How much land do you farm?" "Enough to keep busy," he said with a slight smile, flipping what smelled like amazing chicken in a pan. "Why do you ask?" "I walked for a while today and couldn't find the end of the fields." "Well, farming takes space," he said, not really answering her question. "How are you settling in? Is there anything you need? Anything I can get from town?" He changed the subject so smoothly that Maya didn't push it. She assumed he was probably embarrassed about working land he didn't own. Maybe he was a farmhand for some rich landowner. That would explain the big fields and the modest lifestyle. As the second week began, Maya started noticing other strange things. The town they lived near was small, maybe a few thousand people, but whenever Thomas drove her there for groceries, people treated him differently than she expected. The store owner would wave enthusiastically and sometimes refuse payment for certain items. "Consider it a gift," he'd say, and Thomas would insist on paying, but the man would just smile knowingly. At the hardware store, the manager personally helped Thomas find what he needed, chatting about crop yields and weather patterns like they were old friends. But there was something else in the way he spoke to Thomas. A kind of deference, respect that seemed deeper than just neighborly friendness. Maya assumed Thomas was just well-liked. Small towns were like that, she figured. Everyone knew everyone. But then one day, a man in an expensive suit arrived at the farmhouse in a luxury car that looked wildly out of place on the gravel driveway. Maya watched from the kitchen window as he and Thomas talked near the barn. The man was taking notes, nodding seriously, and treating Thomas like he was someone important. When Thomas came back inside, Maya asked who it was. "Just someone interested in buying some equipment," Thomas said casually. "Want some lunch?" Another subject change. Another non-answer. The third week brought a change in their routine. Thomas came in from the fields earlier than usual, around mid-afternoon, and found Maya reading on the porch. "I need to go into the city tomorrow," he said, sitting down on the step below her. "Medical supply run for the town clinic. Want to come along? Might be nice for you to see something familiar." Maya agreed immediately. She was desperate for anything that felt like her old life. The next day, they drove for 2 hours in Thomas's old pickup truck. Maya kept expecting it to break down, but it ran smoothly despite its worn appearance. When they reached the city, Thomas navigated the streets like he'd been there many times before. He pulled up to a large medical supply company, and Maya decided to wait in the truck. But through the window, she saw something that made her sit up straighter. The company's manager came out personally to greet Thomas. They shook hands like old friends, and she could see them laughing about something. When Thomas returned 40 minutes later, the truck bed was loaded with boxes. "That's a lot of supplies," Maya commented. "The clinic needed some things," Thomas said simply. "Figured I'd help out." "That must have been expensive," Thomas shrugged. "I had some savings. Community health is important." "Savings. Right." Maya looked at his faded jeans and worn boots, at the truck that had to be at least 15 years old. What kind of savings did a farmhand have that could buy an entire truck bed full of medical supplies? That evening, Maya did something she probably shouldn't have. She searched for Thomas online. There wasn't much. No social media accounts, no public profiles, just a few mentions in local farming news articles about crop yields and sustainable agriculture practices. Nothing that explained the contradictions she kept noticing. The fourth week brought a breakthrough in their relationship. Maya had started helping around the house not because Thomas asked, but because she couldn't stand feeling useless anymore. She cooked dinner one night, a recipe her mother had taught her years ago. and the smile on Thomas's face when he tasted it made something warm bloom in her chest. "This is incredible," he said. "You didn't have to, but I'm really glad you did." They started eating dinner together every night after that, actually talking instead of sitting in awkward silence. Thomas told her about his day, explaining farming in a way that made it sound almost interesting. Maya talked about the book she was reading and slowly, carefully about her life back in the city. "Did you want to come here?" Thomas asked one evening, his voice gentle but direct. "To marry me, I mean. Or did your family push you into it?" Maya appreciated the honesty. "They pushed, but I could have said no. I guess I didn't have the energy to fight anymore." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'm sorry you felt that way. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, even if the circumstances weren't ideal." Something in his tone made Maya look at him more carefully. He meant it. This strange, quiet man who worked impossible hours and lived in a rundown house actually seemed glad she was there. "Why do you live like this?" The question slipped out before Maya could stop it. "You work so hard, but everything here is so basic. Don't you want more?" Thomas set down his fork and thought for a moment. "My grandfather used to say that the best way to lose yourself is to chase after more. I have everything I need, a roof over my head, food to eat, work that matters. Why would I need more than that?" "But don't you want nice things? A new truck? A better house?" "Nice things don't make a life," Thomas said quietly. "People do. Purpose does. I'd rather invest in those." Maya didn't know what to say to that. In her world, everyone wanted more. Better clothes, bigger apartments, newer cars. The idea of someone genuinely content with less felt foreign. That night, lying in bed, Maya realized something unsettling. She was starting to like it here. Not the poverty or the isolation, but the simplicity, the quiet, the way Thomas treated her like a person instead of a problem. She'd gained weight because food had become comfort when nothing else in her life felt good. But here, working around the house, walking the property, eating meals made from fresh ingredients from Thomas's garden, she felt different. Stronger somehow. More alive. She wasn't losing weight. That wasn't the point. But she was feeling better, sleeping better, breathing easier, and Thomas never once mentioned her size, never suggested she should eat less or exercise more. He just treated her with a steady, quiet respect that she'd never experienced before. It scared her how much that meant. On Sunday of the 4th week, Thomas had the day off. He asked Maya if she wanted to go to the town's farmer's market with him. "I'm donating some produce," he explained. "The community food bank runs a table there. Thought you might enjoy seeing the town properly." At the market, Maya watched as Thomas unloaded crate after crate of vegetables from the truck bed. Tomatoes, squash, peppers, lettuce. Enough food to feed dozens of families. The food bank coordinator, an older woman named Betty, hugged Thomas like he was her own son. "Every week," she told Maya, "this man brings more food than anyone else in the county. We'd have half the supplies without him." Thomas looked embarrassed. "It's nothing, just sharing what we grow." But it wasn't nothing. Maya did quick math in her head. This much produce grown and donated every week that required serious land and resources, more than a poor farmhand would have access to. Walking through the market afterward, Maya noticed how everyone greeted Thomas. The mayor stopped to shake his hand. Business owners waved. Parents pointed him out to their kids like he was someone worth knowing. Who exactly was Thomas Reed? And why was he pretending to be something he clearly wasn't? Maya decided it was time to find out. Maya woke up gasping for air. Her chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around her ribs and was slowly tightening them. She tried to sit up, but dizziness washed over her in waves. "Thomas," she tried to call out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water in the process. The crash brought Thomas running. He appeared in her doorway within seconds, still in his work clothes from the fields. "Maya, what's wrong?" He was at her side immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Can't breathe right," she managed. "Chest hurts." Thomas didn't waste time with questions. He scooped her up like she weighed nothing, which Maya knew wasn't true, and carried her down the stairs. She wanted to protest, to tell him to put her down, but she couldn't get enough air to form the words. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Thomas drove faster than she'd ever seen him drive, one hand on the wheel and one holding hers. He kept telling her to breathe slowly, to stay with him, his voice steady even though she could see worry etched deep in his face. They didn't go to the small-town clinic. Thomas drove straight to the city, to a large private hospital Maya had only seen from the outside, the kind of place that required good insurance or deep pockets. The moment they pulled up to the emergency entrance, everything moved fast. Too fast for Maya's foggy brain to follow. Thomas carried her through the automatic doors, and suddenly staff appeared from everywhere. "Mr. Reed," a nurse said immediately, recognition clear in her voice. "We'll get her right in, no waiting room. No paperwork first." They had Maya on a gurney and rolling down a hallway within minutes. Thomas stayed right beside her, holding her hand. "You know him?" Maya heard one nurse whisper to another. "That's Thomas Reed," came the response. "Get Dr. Patterson, now." Within the hour, Maya was in a private room with an IV in her arm and oxygen helping her breathe easier. The doctor, an older man with kind eyes, explained that she'd had a severe panic attack combined with some concerning blood pressure readings. "Your body is under stress," Dr. Patterson said gently. "Both physical and emotional, I'd guess. We need to run some tests, keep you overnight for observation." Maya nodded weakly. She felt exhausted and embarrassed. A panic attack, of course. Just her body failing her again in another way. "I'll stay," Thomas said simply. "Sir, visiting hours," a nurse began. "I'll stay," Thomas repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. The nurse looked at Dr. Patterson, who nodded once. "It's fine. Mr. Reed can stay." That was the first strange thing. The second was when Maya overheard a conversation in the hallway later that evening. She was half asleep, groggy from medication, but the voices carried clearly. "The bill for room 304, a woman's voice asked. "Already handled," another voice responded. "Mr. Reed took care of it. Full private care, all tests, medications, everything. He said spare no expense, and of course he did. You know he funded the new children's wing last year?" Maya's eyes shot open. "Funded a hospital wing, Thomas?" She must have misheard. The medication was making her confused. That had to be it. But when morning came and she felt clearer, things didn't make more sense. They made less. The nurses treated Thomas like he was someone important. The doctors consulted with him directly about her care. When breakfast came, it wasn't regular hospital food, but something that looked like it came from a restaurant. "Thomas," Maya said when they were finally alone, "how are we paying for all this?" He was sitting in the chair beside her bed, looking tired but relieved that she seemed better. "Don't worry about that. I am worrying about it. This kind of care, a private room, all these tests. I know what hospitals cost. You can't afford this." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "I have some savings set aside. Your health is more important than money." "Some savings? Thomas, be honest with me. What's going on?" But before he could answer, Dr. Patterson came in with test results. He wanted to talk about Maya's health, her weight, her stress levels. He spoke kindly but directly about how her body was showing signs of strain and how she needed to make some changes. Not for appearance, but for her actual health. "The good news," the doctor said, "is that you're young and these issues are manageable. With proper diet, stress management, and gradual exercise, you can improve significantly, but you need to take this seriously." Maya felt the familiar shame creeping in, but then Thomas spoke up. "She's been doing better already," he said. "Since moving to the farm, she's been more active, eating healthier. We just need to support that progress." The way he said "we" made Maya's throat tight for reasons that had nothing to do with breathing problems. Dr. Patterson smiled. "Good, keep that up. And Maya, I want to see you back here in a month for a follow-up. No charge," he added, glancing at Thomas. "Consider it part of today's care package." After the doctor left, Maya turned to Thomas. "Why would he say no charge like that? And why does everyone here know you?" Thomas sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I donate to the hospital sometimes. It's not a big deal." "Donate how much?" "Enough to help." "Maya, can we talk about this later? I'm just glad you're okay. You scared me." The genuine worry in his voice distracted her from pushing further. "I scared myself. I don't know what happened. I just woke up and everything felt wrong. The doctor said it was stress and anxiety. Have you been feeling anxious?" Maya laughed, but it came out bitter. "I'm living in a strange place, married to a man I barely know, away from everything familiar. Yeah, I've been a little anxious." Thomas flinched like she'd hit him. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was that bad. I thought maybe you were adjusting, okay? You seemed happier lately." I am. I don't know. Maya felt tears starting. Everything is so confusing. You're confusing. This whole situation is confusing. A nurse came in then to check her vitals and the conversation ended. But it hung in the air between them for the rest of the day. They discharged Maya that evening with instructions for follow-up care and lifestyle changes. Thomas drove home slowly, carefully like she was made of glass. When they got back to the farmhouse, Maya expected to feel relieved. Instead, she felt unsettled. Something had shifted during those hours in the hospital, and she couldn't quite name what it was. Thomas helped her inside and got her settled on the couch with pillows and blankets. He made tea and brought her medications. He was attentive without being smothering, helpful without making her feel helpless. "Thomas," she said as he handed her the tea, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." He sat down carefully on the other end of the couch. "Okay, who are you, really? And don't give me vague answers about having some savings. I'm not stupid. The way people treat you, the hospital, the donations, all of it, something doesn't add up." Thomas looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with something internally. Finally, he spoke. "You're right. I haven't been completely honest with you. But I had my reasons, and I hope you'll understand them when I explain." Maya's heart started beating faster. "I'm listening." "I do farm," Thomas began. "That part is true, but I don't farm a few acres as a hired hand. I own the land. A lot of it. About 5,000 acres across 3 counties. Maya stared at him. 5,000 acres? My grandfather built up the operation over his lifetime. He left it to me when he passed 10 years ago. I've grown it since then through careful investment and smart farming practices. The land is worth, well, a lot, but the house, the truck, the way you live is a choice," Thomas finished. "I live simply because I believe in it. My grandfather taught me that land and money are responsibilities, not toys. The profits from the farm go back into the land, into the community, into helping people. I don't need a mansion or a fancy car to be happy." Maya felt like the room was spinning again, but this time it had nothing to do with her health. "So you're rich?" "I'm comfortable," Thomas said carefully. "But I don't live like it because that's not who I am. And when my grandmother told me about you, about your situation, I agreed to meet you because I understood something important." "What?" "That you'd been judged unfairly for something superficial. My mother struggled with her weight her whole life. She faced constant criticism, constant judgment. I watched it hurt her every single day. I promised myself I'd never be someone who judged people that way. And when I heard about you, I thought maybe we could build something real, something based on who we actually are, not what we look like or what we own. So you lied to me," Maya said, her voice shaking. "You let me think you were poor. You let me feel sorry for you. I didn't lie exactly. I just didn't correct your assumptions. And I know that's basically the same thing." Thomas leaned forward, his eyes pleading with her to understand. "But Maya, think about it. If I told you from the start that I had money, would you ever know if you liked me for me? Would I ever know if you stayed because you wanted to or because it was comfortable?" Maya wanted to be angry. She wanted to yell at him for the deception. But part of her, a big part, understood exactly what he meant. Because she'd fallen for him thinking he had nothing. She'd started to care about this quiet, humble man who worked dawn to dusk and treated her with respect. The money didn't change who he was, but it changed everything else. "I need time to think," she finally said. Thomas nodded and stood up. "Take all the time you need. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. You rest and recover. We can talk more when you're ready." He started to leave, then paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth, these past few weeks with you have been the happiest I've been in years." That part was never pretend. After he left, Maya lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Thomas Reed wasn't a poor farmer. He was a wealthy landowner who chose to live like he had nothing. And somehow, against all logic, that made her feel something she hadn't expected. Respect. Maybe even something more. Maya spent 3 days barely speaking to Thomas. She moved her things to the guest house, a small cottage about 100 yards from the main house that she hadn't even known existed. Thomas showed it to her without argument, helped carry her bags, and quietly left her alone. The cottage was small but comfortable. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with an old clawfoot tub. Through the window she could see the main house and watch Thomas come and go with his daily routine. He still left before dawn, still worked until sunset, still lived like a man who had nothing, even though she now knew he had everything. That was what bothered her most. Not the money itself, but what it meant. She'd fallen for him. Actually fallen for him. For the first time in her life, she'd started to feel something real for someone. And now she couldn't trust any of it. Had he been testing her, watching to see if she'd stay with a poor farmer, collecting evidence of her character like she was some kind of experiment? On the fourth morning, there was a knock on the cottage door. Maya opened it expecting Thomas, but instead found Betty from the food bank, the older woman from the farmer's market. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Dear," Betty said, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Thought you might like some fresh muffins. Thomas mentioned you hadn't been feeling well." Maya invited her in, grateful for the company. They sat at the small kitchen table and Betty poured them both coffee from a thermos she'd brought. "He's worried about you," Betty said after a moment. "Thomas, I mean. He came by the food bank yesterday looking like a kicked puppy. Wouldn't say what happened, but I could tell something was wrong between you two." Maya didn't know what to say. She picked at a muffin, crumbling it between her fingers. "Can I tell you something?" Betty continued. "I've known Thomas since he was a boy. Watched him grow up after his grandfather took over raising him. That man has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, but he's also been hurt before." "Hurt how?" Betty sighed. "About 5 years ago, Thomas tried dating a woman from the city. Told her right away about his land, his money. Wanted to be honest. She seemed wonderful at first. Said all the right things about not caring about wealth, about loving him for who he was. They got engaged within 6 months. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Then, Thomas found out she'd been telling her, friends back in the city, that she'd landed a rich farmer and was already planning how to spend his money. She wanted him to sell the farm, move to the city, live in a penthouse. When he said no, that this life meant something to him, she left. Told him he was wasting his potential living like a peasant. That's awful, Maya said quietly. It broke something in him. He hasn't tried to date anyone since. Until you. Betty reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "I don't know what happened between you two, but I do know that boy wouldn't hurt you on purpose. He's not built that way." After Betty left, Maya sat alone with her thoughts. She'd been so focused on feeling deceived that she hadn't considered Thomas might have his own reasons for being careful, his own scars. That afternoon, Maya decided to walk the property. Really walk it this time, not just a quick exploration. She needed to understand the full scope of what Thomas had built. The field seemed endless. Corn stretched to the horizon in one direction. Wheat swayed in the breeze in another. She found orchards she hadn't known existed, trees heavy with apples and pears. There were greenhouse structures in the distance and barns that housed equipment she couldn't begin to identify. But what struck her most was how well-maintained everything was. This wasn't just land someone owned. This was land someone loved. Every fence was mended. Every crop was carefully tended. Every structure, while simple, was solid and built to last. She found Thomas in one of the far fields, checking irrigation lines. He saw her approaching and straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. They stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing what to say. "It's bigger than I imagined," Maya finally said. 5,000 acres is a lot, Thomas agreed. "Takes a full crew to manage properly. I have 12 people who work here full-time, plus seasonal help during harvest." "Where are they?" "I've never seen anyone. They work different sections, and I asked them to give you space while you settled in. Didn't want to overwhelm you." He paused. "I've been trying not to overwhelm you with a lot of things. Maybe I went too far." Maya looked out at the fields. "Why do you do it? Work like a farmhand when you could hire people to do everything?" Thomas considered the question. "Because it matters to me. This land, this work, it's not just about making money. It's about feeding people, creating something good. My grandfather used to say that land has memory. It remembers how you treat it. I want this land to remember being cared for." There was something in his voice, a passion that Maya had never heard before. This wasn't just a job or an inheritance to him. It was purpose. "Betty came to see me," Maya said. Thomas looked worried. "I didn't ask her to. If she said anything to make you uncomfortable, she told me about your ex-fiancé." Thomas's face closed off. "That was a long time ago. Was it really about the money? Or was it about you not being willing to change who you are?" "Both, I think. She wanted someone with money who would use it the way she thought it should be used. I wanted someone who could love this life. We weren't compatible." Maya took a breath. "Is that why you didn't tell me? Because you were afraid I'd be like her?" "Partly," Thomas admitted. "But also because I wanted you to see this life really see it, before you knew there was money behind it. I wanted you to decide if you could be happy here based on the reality of it, not the bank account that comes with it. That's not really fair though, is it? You got to see me at my most vulnerable while hiding who you really were. You're right. It wasn't fair. Thomas looked at her directly. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting both of us, but I was really just protecting myself. I was afraid of being hurt again, so I set up a test you didn't even know you were taking. That was wrong. The honesty in his voice cracked something in Maya's chest. She'd been angry for days, but underneath the anger was something else. Fear. Fear that this good thing she'd started to find was built on lies. Fear that she'd been foolish to start caring. Fear that she'd end up hurt again. I fell for you, she said quietly. The you I thought you were. The farmer who worked impossible hours and lived simply and treated me with respect. And now I don't know if that person even exists. He does, Thomas said urgently. Maya, he does. That is who I am. The money doesn't change that. I still wake up at dawn and work these fields. I still believe in living simply. I still think you're the most interesting person I've talked to in years. None of that was fake. But you have this whole other life I don't know about. Business meetings with people in suits. Hospital donations. 5,000 acres. That's not simple, Thomas. That's complicated. You're right. It is complicated. But here's the truth, and I should have told you this from the start. Thomas took a step closer. I live simply because it makes me happy. I give money away because I have more than I need and others have less. I work the land myself because it connects me to something bigger than money. And I wanted to know you because my grandmother said you were kind and funny, and that you'd been hurt by people who should have protected you. That made me want to meet you. The fact that I started falling for you over the past few weeks, that has nothing to do with tests or money or anything else. That's just you. Maya felt tears starting. How am I supposed to know that's real? How do I know this isn't just you saying what I want to hear? You don't, Thomas said simply. That's the problem with trust. You have to decide to give it, not knowing for sure if it's safe. All I can do is promise to be honest from now on. Completely honest. And hope that's enough. They stood there in the middle of the wheat field as the sun started setting. Maya thought about the past few weeks. How Thomas had never once made her feel bad about her weight. How he'd cooked healthy meals without making it seem like a diet. How he'd carried her to the hospital without hesitation. How he'd respected her need for space even though she could see it hurt him. Tell me something true, Maya said. Something you've never told anyone. Thomas thought for a moment. I'm lonely. I've been lonely for years. I have all this land, all this success, but I eat dinner alone every night. I work from dawn to dusk partly because it's necessary, but partly because it keeps me too tired to feel how empty the house is. When you came here, even though the circumstances were strange, I started hoping that maybe I'd found someone who could be a partner in this life. That scared me more than anything, which is probably why I handled it so badly. Maya understood loneliness. She'd felt it in a crowded city, surrounded by people who looked at her but never really saw her. I'm scared too, she admitted. I'm scared that I'm not enough for this life. That eventually you'll realize you made a mistake and wish you'd chosen someone different. Someone thinner, prettier, more sophisticated. Maya, Thomas said, and there was such tenderness in his voice that it made her chest ache. I don't want someone different. I want you. The you who reads 3 books a week. The you who makes incredible pasta sauce. The you who's been getting stronger every day since you got here. The you who's brave enough to start over in a place you never wanted to come to. That's who I want. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in oranges and purples. In the golden light, standing in the middle of his wheat field, Thomas looked less like a wealthy landowner and more like the man she'd been falling for. Just a person, flawed and hopeful, trying to find connection in a world that made it hard. I need more time, Maya said. But I want to try. To trust this. To trust you, Thomas nodded. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere. As Maya walked back to the cottage, she felt lighter somehow. The anger had burned away, leaving behind something clearer. She still had doubts, still had fears, but she also had hope. And maybe that was enough to start with. 2 weeks passed in a strange but comfortable rhythm. Maya stayed in the cottage but spent her days at the main house. She and Thomas ate breakfast together now, talking about everything and nothing while the sun came up. He showed her the business side of farming, explaining crop rotations and market prices with a patience that surprised her. She discovered he was brilliant with numbers and strategy. building his grandfather's legacy into something even bigger while staying true to its roots. But more than that, she discovered who he really was. Thomas introduced her to his crew, 12 people who clearly respected him but also joked with him like family. He paid them well above market rate, she learned, and covered their health insurance completely. 3 of them had worked for his grandfather and stayed on because, as one older man put it, Thomas treats us like partners, not employees. Maya also learned about the foundation. Thomas had established it 5 years ago, quietly funding scholarships for farming students, covering medical bills for families in crisis, and keeping small farms afloat when corporate agriculture tried to buy them out. He showed her the paperwork one evening, clearly uncomfortable with her praise. "It's just money," he said, shrugging. "It's supposed to be used for something." "Most people with money don't think like that," Maya replied. "Then most people with money are doing it wrong." The simplicity of his worldview was both refreshing and challenging. Maya had grown up believing money was the answer to happiness. But Thomas had money and chose to live like he didn't, finding happiness in work and purpose instead. It made her question everything she'd thought she wanted. One morning, Maya woke up early and decided to join Thomas in the fields. He looked surprised when she appeared in boots and work gloves she'd borrowed, but his smile was worth the early wake-up call. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know. I want to." They worked together checking the apple orchard, and Maya found herself actually enjoying the physical labor. Her body still struggled sometimes, but she was stronger than she'd been 2 months ago. Her breathing was easier, her stamina better, not because she was trying to lose weight, but because she was living differently. "I've been thinking," Maya said as they took a water break under one of the trees, "about what I want to do here. If I stay, I mean." Thomas's expression was carefully neutral. "And I want to help with the foundation. Specifically, I want to start a program for women's health, body positivity education, resources for people struggling with weight and self-image, free counseling, the kind of support I never had." Thomas set down his water bottle, his full attention on her. "That's a brilliant idea." "You think so?" "Maya, I think it's exactly the kind of thing that could change lives. People in rural areas don't have access to those resources, and coming from someone who's lived it, that would mean everything to the people you'd help." The enthusiasm in his voice made Maya's decision clearer. She'd been circling around it for days, afraid to commit, but suddenly it felt right. "I want to stay," she said. "Not in the cottage here with you. Really try this." Thomas looked like he'd stopped breathing. "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified," Maya admitted. "But I'm sure. These past 2 months have been the hardest and the best of my life. You've shown me what respect looks like, what partnership could be, and I don't want to walk away from that because I'm scared." "I'm scared too," Thomas said quietly. "Scared I'll mess this up somehow, that I won't be what you need. Then we'll be scared together." Maya reached for his hand. "But Thomas, I need you to promise me something. No more secrets. No more hiding things to protect me or test me or whatever. We do this honestly or we don't do it at all. I promise. Complete honesty from now on." He squeezed her hand. "Starting with this. I'm completely in love with you. Have been for weeks. And it terrifies me." Maya felt her breath catch. "You love me. I love that you sing off-key when you cook. I love how you get completely lost in books and forget to eat lunch. I love your laugh and your stubbornness and how you're not afraid to call me out when I'm being an idiot. I love watching you get stronger and more confident every day. I just love you, Maya. All of you." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. "I love you too. I didn't want to, but I do." Thomas laughed, and it was the freest sound she'd ever heard from him. "You didn't want to?" "You know what I mean. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But here we are." "Here we are," he echoed. And then he kissed her, soft and sweet under the apple trees. That evening, Maya moved her things back into the main house, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. They spent the night planning her foundation program, Thomas offering ideas and resources while Maya sketched out what it could look like. "We could renovate the old barn," Thomas suggested. "Turn it into a community center. Space for counseling, exercise classes, support groups, whatever you need. That would cost a fortune. That's literally what the money is for, Maya. To build things that matter." She was still getting used to that. To the idea that money could be a tool for good instead of just a measure of worth. The next challenge came a week later when Maya's parents called. They'd barely spoken since she'd left the city. Just a few brief texts confirming she was alive. Now her mother wanted to visit. She probably wants to see if I've lost weight, Maya said bitterly as she hung up. Then let her come, Thomas said. Let her see how happy you are. That's better than any number on a scale. Maya's parents arrived on a Saturday morning, her father driving her mother's luxury sedan that looked absurdly out of place on the gravel driveway. Maya watched from the porch as they climbed out, taking in the old farmhouse with barely concealed disappointment. Well, her mother said, kissing Maya's cheek. You look well, happier than I expected. It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't quite a compliment either. Thomas came out to greet them, wiping his hands on a towel. He'd been cooking lunch, wanting to make a good impression. Maya's father shook his hand with the wary respect of a man meeting his daughter's husband for the first time. The lunch was awkward at first. Maya's parents kept exchanging glances, clearly confused by the modest house and simple meal. They asked Thomas polite questions about farming, the kind that barely masked their pity for his simple life. Then Maya's father noticed something through the window. That's quite a bit of land you have there. How many acres are you working? About 5,000, Thomas said casually, passing the salad. Maya's mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. 5,000? Give or take. It's been in my family for 3 generations. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Her parents suddenly paid much more attention, asking different questions now. About property values, about profits, about Thomas's business. Maya felt sick watching it happen. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. The moment people knew about the money, everything changed. He also runs a charitable foundation, Maya said, her voice sharp. He funds scholarships and helps struggling families. He's kept the local clinic running for the past 5 years. Her mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How generous. After lunch, while Thomas showed her father around the property, Maya's mother cornered her in the kitchen. Well, she said, you certainly landed on your feet. A wealthy landowner. I had no idea grandmother's friend was so well connected. That's not why I'm here, Maya said firmly. Of course not, dear. I'm just saying, things worked out well for you. Better than we hoped? Better than you hoped when you shipped me off like damaged goods, you mean? Her mother had the grace to look uncomfortable. We wanted what was best for you. A fresh start. What you wanted was for me to be someone else's problem. Maya set down the dish she'd been washing. But you know what? I'm glad you sent me here. Not because Thomas has money, but because he's the first person who's ever made me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. He sees me, really sees me. Not my weight or my failures or my potential. Just me. Maya, I've been here 3 months and you're just now visiting. You didn't call to check on me. You didn't ask if I was okay. You just assumed I'd either lose weight or at least be out of your hair. But I'm happy here. Genuinely happy. And that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with finding someone who treats me like a partner instead of a project. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. You do seem different. Stronger somehow. I am stronger. Because I'm building a life that's mine, not trying to fit into someone else's idea of what my life should be. When her parents left that evening, Maya felt lighter. She'd said things she'd needed to say for years. Thomas pulled her into a hug as they watched the sedan disappear down the driveway. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? Arguing with my mother? For standing up for yourself? For us. 3 months later, the community center opened in the renovated barn. Maya's foundation program launched with 10 women in the first support group. She hired counselors and nutritionists who specialized in sustainable health, not quick fixes. She created a space where women could work on their health without judgment, without pressure, without the toxic messages she'd lived with for so long. Thomas stood in the back during the opening ceremony, watching Maya speak to the crowd with confidence she'd never had when she first arrived. She talked about her journey, her struggles, and how finding acceptance had changed her life more than any diet ever could. That night, back at the house they now truly shared, Thomas found Maya on the porch looking at the stars. Do you ever think about how we started? She asked. How angry I was when I first got here.